Good morning, dear friends, and welcome on this Sunday morning to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship at Stony Brook. Whether you are here in the sanctuary or attending online, we are glad that you are here. My name is June Cerveni, and I am co-leading our service this morning with Vivian Viloria-Fisher and fellow worship associate Maria Cecilia Torres. Our minister is the Reverend Dr. Madeline Campbell, and Deb Little is our Director of Religious Education. Information about our religious education program for children and youth may be found on our website at UUFSB.org. I'd like to offer a special welcome to anyone who is new to our fellowship, and I hope that you find among us inspiration for living and nourishment for your spirit. Unitarian Universalism as a living tradition has two commitments: freedom of belief and an orientation toward justice. You can find additional information about the principles we strive to live by, again, on our website at UUFSB.org. If you are attending this service virtually, please watch the chat for the order of service and a few important links during the service, especially the visitors form and the feedback form, because we would love to hear from you. After the service, you can leave this virtual space, go to our webpage, and click on the link for small group chats in order to visit with a smaller group of friendly people. We have several announcements this morning. The first one is about parking. We are an aging congregation, and as time goes by, there are more of us who have mobility issues. This is a request that for those of us who can move more easily, think about those who can't, and leave the parking spots that are closer to the sanctuary doors for those who could benefit from a shorter walk. The parking spots that should be left for those with mobility issues are those closest to the sanctuary doors and on the other side of the lot from the pine tree to the entrance of the fellowship. For the rest of us, please leave your cars at the far end of the parking lot beyond the pine tree and near the sheds or the overflow parking lot. The far side of the RE lot is also possible, but please be aware that families with children will need to park there as well. Second, members and friends are invited to contribute to a dress-up box for RE. Please bring freshly cleaned hats, scarves, and vests that you no longer use. Clothing for all genders is welcome. Give the items to our DRE, Deb Little, or leave them on the shelves outside her office. And our children thank you. We have been a welcoming congregation for many years. And even so, there are new things we need to know to be fully welcoming and inclusive. Everyone in the fellowship is invited to a presentation entitled Understanding and Supporting Transgender, Gender Non-Binary, and Intersex People. Julie Gray Owens, the Executive Director of Gender Equality New York, and a transgender activist, together with other members of this community, will discuss this topic and offer advice about how to advocate for LGBTQIA+ individuals in the face of homophobic and transphobic legislation. The workshop is from 1 to 3, right here in the sanctuary on Sunday, October 2nd, which is next Sunday. Youth are invited, along with adults, friends, relatives. Just stay after the service and the coffee hour. And my last announcement, choir is starting. Yes, the mighty unicorn singers are back in action, and we want you to come share music and fellowship. We meet every Wednesday evening and sing for services about once a month. All voices are welcome. For more information, please see Dan Weymouth or send a note to our office. I now invite us to enter into the sacred time and sacred space of worship with the sounding of the morning bell. May the hearers awaken from forgetfulness and transcend all anxiety and sorrow. I have asked Stu Fisher to light our chalice here this morning, and I invite everyone who is attending virtually to light a chalice or candle at home. Maria Cecilia and I share words from our gray hymnal, translated by Lilia Quaverno. May this candle we now kindle inspire us to use our powers.
Que esta luz que ahora encendemos nos inspire a usar nuestros dones y poderes
To heal and not to harm,
para sanar y no para herir,
to help and not to hinder,
para ayudar y no para impedir,
to bless and not to curse,
para bendecir y no maldecir,
to serve you, Spirit of freedom and love.
para servirte a ti, espíritu de amor, compasión y perdón.
By looking at the bee. Can't judge a daughter by looking at her mother. You can't judge a book by looking at the cover. Oh, now can't you see? You misjudge me. I look like a farmer, but I'm a lover. You can't judge a book by looking at the cover. You can't judge sugar by looking at the cane. You can't judge a woman by looking at her name. You can't judge a sister by looking at her brother. You can't judge a book by looking at the cover. Oh, now can't you see? You misjudge me. I look like a farmer, but I'm a lover. You can't judge a book by looking at the cover. looking at the wrong. You can't judge one by looking at the other. You can't judge a book by looking at the cover. Oh, now can't you see? You misjudge me. You think you know me, but I'm not like any other. You can't judge a book by looking at the cover.
This morning, our service leader is Vivian Viloria-Fisher, a longtime member of our fellowship. Vivian was born Maria de Los Angeles Viviana Viloria in the Dominican Republic almost 75 years ago and arrived at Idlewood, now JFK, 3 months later. Vivian lived in New York City through college, where she earned her BA in English from Hunter College. She moved to Long Island in 1969 and began her teaching career at Middle Country School District and earned her master's at Stony Brook University in 1973, 2 months before the birth of her first child, Donna. Vivian has 5 children, 4 children-in-law, 8 grandchildren. Vivian and Stu Fisher have been members of the UU Fellowship for almost 20 years. Vivian taught RE for 10 years and served as a LIAC coming-of-age leader. She enjoyed singing with the suffragettes and portraying various characters during the 1890s fairs. She served on the annual budget drive committee and the nominating committee. Thank you, June. This is a little, let me see. I feel very giant. The summer services, as you all know, were terrific and lay-led, and they had a very deep impact on many of us, and I felt very moved by many of the services. From David's talk that reminded us of our unconscious bias, to Lem's discussion of the line by Keats, we make, out of quarrels with others, rhetoric, but of the quarrel with ourselves, poetry. I have written many poems that have been the pull and tug of my mind, my soul, my spirit. When Lem said those words, I felt compelled to share some of my battles with you, my friends. I have brought my poetry to share with you this morning, just 2 poems. This first is a defiant poem, expressing judgments made about me by non-Latinos, by men, and sometimes even by myself. My argument with myself is about my own worthiness. My first poem, The Boulder. You say I have a chip on my shoulder? Oh, if you knew the weight of that boulder. The boulder whose face reflected the disappointed air of a girl a bit too dark to think that I was fair. The boulder that judged a Latina can't be smart. Should I then wear my IQ pinned upon my heart? The boulder that echoed back in manly tones, the words that had been expressed that were my very own. My life's journey might have been thwarted by that boulder, had not hope and grit also tapped me on the shoulder. Please stand in body or in spirit for our opening hymn, number 305, De Colores. I was too far from the mic. Am I better there or okay? Thank you. In the next poem, this is a little tough. Okay. In this next poem, I'm going to switch to my iPad. It's too hard with this binder. The best laid plans. There we go. In this poem, I examine the person that I am at different stages of my life, sometimes leaving myself behind in order to be accepted, fully discovering that who I am is inextricably tied to my father and mother and who they were. From suddenly to forever. When I was 10, Spanish words floated on thin colored ribbons, untethered to the English of every day. Too high to own, low enough to dazzle. Words of Mami's frustration, soy la clava aquí. But why does she say she's a nail when she's mad, I asked. Esclava means slave, I learned. I'm a slave here in this house. Healing words that soothed a bloody knee. Sana, sana. Si no se sana hoy, se sana mañana. Heal, heal, not today, then tomorrow. Pan American songs asked for a dance or called for a tear. Ay, 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 canta y no llores. Sing and don't cry. Prompted shouting and dancing to Saturday's chores. And our crocodile tears sprang from Mami's boleros. Es la historia de un amor, and solamente una vez. The story of love, and only once, meant ham it up. Mami sang the words of her life. We sang the words of a fantasy tongue. Teachers instructed Mami to speak only English. Spanish would impede our success, slow our learning. John Wayne growled, after all, at banditos to quit that lingo. At 13, Spanish was deemed beneath my capabilities. Study French or German, academic tongues, teachers said. I fell in love with French and changed my name. I called myself Vivian and wrote about ennui. Then I made friends with Cuban girls just off the boat, and in my broken Spanish, tutored math. Hearing this, Sister Grace, who taught me French, exhorted that I not hide a lamp's light, but grasp those words of childhood once again. Challenge the state tests and claim my due. At 20, I fell in love again and changed my name, beguiled by words and foods and customs of a big, boisterous family from a different place. Parts of me were lost in its embrace. With my new name and different race, less doubt was cast upon my worth by citizens of this place, my home. At 30, I gathered the colored ribbons of my childhood. I wove them into every aspect of my life. I relearned all I thought I had forgotten. I felt the pang of the boleros Mami sang at 30. A woman now, I see that young woman's face. She lost the only love she ever had. Though decades passed, no one took his place. At 35, I was a master teacher. I shared the language and the culture of my beloved tongue. But one Spanish, cruel word gave me pause. Omitted from every test or worksheet that I wrote, de repente, suddenly, was the demon I avoided, forcing its synonyms to slip gently into lessons. I came upon it in a chance encounter that dared my mind to travel to a time that was so fraught. Wrestling my denials, vanquishing my pain, I wrapped my heart around that word that made me whole again. At 6, I saw Mommy hold the black receiver against her too white face, her fragile body melting into a vinyl chair. Blue-green eyes, an ocean of pain, her mouth a silent gaping chasm. In the hot Manhattan August, we stuck to her sticky with sweat and fear. Papi flew to his triumphal tour 2 days before. Papi murió de repente. De repente, Papi died. De repente, suddenly. Papi, Ángel Viloria, rey del merengue, leader of the band. Papi was color. Papi was music. Papi was celebration. Papi knew applause, so he gave standing ovations. He thrilled at my performance of Where is Thumpkin? He was wowed by my sister's mambo. The crowds came to pay homage to the king. They whispered, El rey del merengue murió de repente. Newspapers headlined, Viloria murió de repente. Speaking Spanish stopped in our home, de repente. Black and gray of mourning replaced color, de repente. Musicians jamming and girl singers backing stopped, de repente. Moved from Manhattan to projects in the Bronx, de repente. At 73, I said, Alexa, play songs by Ángel Viloria. No, I didn't. I said, Alexa, play songs by Angel Viloria. Alexa wouldn't have gotten Ángel Viloria. The music played for hours, and I danced. In our kitchen, in the summer, we heard My Papi Died de repente. In my kitchen, in the summer, I heard My Father Lives Forever.
Let us settle down into a time set aside for reflection and meditation. I am sharing words attributed to St. Francis of Assisi, words that express our hopes and call us into beloved community with each other. Lee will bring us out of the silence with Fuente de Amor, the words and in your order of service. Don't worry, you got this. This hymn is the Spanish language written version of the Spirit of Life, and the music is exactly the same. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. O Divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. Amen.
It is our spiritual practice to share our plate with an organization that is working for justice in the world. Our shared plate recipient for the month of September is the Brookhaven branch of the NAACP. The Brookhaven branch of this national organization works with other community organizations and is currently involved with working for community rights with elected officials, issues in confidential legal redress, police abuse, civic engagement, redistricting, the Brookhaven Action and Remediation Group, promoting COVID information and vaccinations, and blocking housing evictions. Please give with generosity to support their valuable programs and initiatives. You may make your gift in the plate or online, and for those online, the link to donate is in the chat box.
Look what they've done to my song, Ma. Look what they've done to my song. Well, it's the only thing I could do half right, and it's turning out all wrong, Ma. Look what they've done to my song. what they've done to my brain. Well, they picked it like a chicken bone, and I think I'm half insane. Ma, look what they've done to my song. I wish I could find a good book to live in. Wish I could find a good book. 'Cause if I could find a real good book, I would never have to look at what they've done to my song. Ils ont changé ma chanson, ma. Ils ont changé ma chanson. C'est la seule chose que je peux faire, et ce n'est pas bon, ma. Ils ont changé ma chanson. Maybe it'll all be alright, ma. Maybe it'll all be okay. Well, if people are buying tears, I'll be rich someday, ma. Look at what they've done to my song. Look what they've done to my song, ma. Look what they've done to my song. It was the only thing I could do half right, and they turned it upside down, ma. Look what they've done to my song. La da 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 da. La da 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 da. La la da 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 da. La 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 la. La da 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 da. Look what they've done to my song.
When I was serving in the Suffolk County Legislature, a colleague commented, "How could any Latino be a Republican?" She was unfamiliar with a popular Spanish saying, "Los hispanos vienen en muchos colores y muchos sabores." Hispanics come in many colors and many flavors. Okay. I could have referred her to my extended family that is made up primarily of Republicans. This conservative inclination is often attributed to the religious position on Roe, but conservative leanings among many Latinos existed long before that lightning rod was in play. My mother was the daughter of a Dominican woman and a Kentucky farmer who served in the U.S. Army during the United States occupation of the Dominican Republic. While stationed in the DR, Webster A. Hicks met a beautiful young woman, Julia Sanchez, at a reception held for military men at my grandmother's country club. This country club, or society, as the Sanchez family referred to it, held dances, poetry readings, and was made up of Dominicans fond of tracing their European roots. My grandmother recited a poem at the party held for the GIs, and although my grandmother recited this poem for us with great elan, "Yo soy la ciencia," she would expound, I doubt that my grandfather was attracted by her elocution. They married. She was very pretty. They married, and my country club grandmother found herself milking cows and smoking hams on a farm in Amelia, Ohio. My mother and her siblings were born in the United States and returned to the Dominican Republic when my grandparents divorced when my mother was 8. As a teenager, my mother met a tall, dark, handsome musician whom she married. He did not have the pedigree of the Sanchez clan, but he and his family had a thriving music business that the dictator Trujillo was drawing into. My father dared to stand up to the dictator and soon decided that it was best to leave Santo Domingo for his safety and for that of our family. He left for New York with my 9-year-old brother a week after my birth, and my mother followed when I was just 3 months old with my 2 sisters who were 6 and 3 years old in tow. Once in New York, my father tuned piano, taught piano lessons, and finally created a band that enjoyed great success. It was called Ángel Viloria y su conjunto típico cibaeño. I dare you to say that twice. El Cibao is an area in the Dominican Republic, and cibaeño meant it typified that folkloric music. So he popularized the merengue, which is folk music, Afro-Spanish music. Sorry, I lost my place to explain that. His albums were sold throughout the Spanish-speaking communities in the United States, the Caribbean, and South America. To this day, if I sing the first few bars of his band's biggest hit, La Cruz, by the way, when I said it to Maria Cecilia, she started singing with me. Before Latino crowd, they will just start singing along with me. The only folks unfamiliar with Ángel Viloria y su conjunto típico cibaeño were people living in the Dominican Republic. Trujillo blocked the sale of my father's music in his native country. But the Puerto Rican community loved him, and he and his band were invited to perform at the grand opening of the San Juan Caribe Hilton. A great farewell concert was held in his honor at the Palladium in Manhattan. He died suddenly a few days after arriving in San Juan. I was almost 7 years old. My mother's siblings had immigrated before us. Her 2 brothers joined the U.S. Army, and her sister started a clothing design business that grew to be very successful. They had little sympathy for those who disagreed with authority, be it Washington, D.C. or the Vatican. No patience with communists or people on welfare. In America, there is opportunity if you are willing to work for it, they'd say, and we are lucky to be living in the greatest country in the world. Liberals and communists were in the same league, according to my uncles. In later decades, hippies were part of the undesirables who questioned our government's policies. My favorite uncle asked if I was a commie traitor like Jane Fonda because of my opposition to the Vietnam War. Being smart and the first one in the family to graduate college was a double-edged sword. Bragging rights for relatives, but barbed remarks about college liberals. When my father died and we had to move to public housing, my mother was angry at the women she'd see sitting on the stoop all day, quotes, collecting welfare checks while she worked all day as a sample maker and spent nights at her Singer sewing machine making all of our clothes. I heard the same comments from Puerto Rican Republicans that I met in Suffolk County. When I asked why they chose to be Republicans, they explained that they did not want to be painted with the same brush as the folks they saw freeloading back in the city. We lived in a parish in Manhattan that had a robust outreach program. In fact, when we first moved to the Holy Name Parish, members of the Society of St. Vincent de Paul came to our door with food and clothing. My mother said, "Oh no, please give that to poor people. We're fine." Kind of echoes Dick Gregory's story, "We ain't poor, we just broke." I guess some people have read that. Good story. Yet, more times than I can count, my mother pawned my father's accordion, our only item of value, for one emergency or another. Although my mother was frustrated by the people who gave the rest of us Spanish a bad name, she did get involved in helping others who had circumstances that they couldn't overcome. And our neighbors called her Doña Mary. Doña being an honorific signifying respect. When Mommy made communion dresses for my sister and me, she made a third for a little girl on the 8th floor. I followed her lead. I became involved in community service in elementary school and was president of my high school community service club, making trips to Welfare Island once a month and bringing food baskets to families in need during holidays. My mother beamed when I received the Community Service Award from Mayor Wagner. But her sister, my aunt, would say, "Charity begins at home. Take care of your family and let them take care of theirs." In 1998, when I ran for county legislator on the Democratic ticket, my aunt dropped me from her will. We were raised to be American, to speak English and fit in. Ay, Vivian, don't let yourself get so dark in the summer. 2 of my sisters were blonde and the other auburn, and all had lighter skin than mine. On my first day at Holy Name School, I had a nickel for milk money for me and one for my younger sister, Kathy, one of the blonde sisters. I approached Kathy at recess to give her the nickel, when a girl named Eileen asked how I knew she was my sister, how I knew her. "She's my sister," I responded. "Oh," said Eileen, "you're a half-breed." I was puzzled. I wasn't an Indian. Thanks again, Hollywood Westerns. My mother's family was white. The term used was cara rosadita, pink-cheeked. And they were. My great-aunts looked like the godmothers in the Disney films, plump, chesty, and rosy-cheeked. My father's family ranged from his green-eyed mother to some very dark cousins. In fact, one evening, when some musicians were visiting and jamming a little in our apartment, Tito Puente started beating out a mambo rhythm. Tito Puente was a skinny young kid who was just breaking in at that time. My sister Rosemary and my cousin Diana, both 12 years old, mamboed to the rhythm, and Tito called out, "Mira, sal y pimienta bailando. Look at that, salt and pepper dancing." Dominicans carry bloodlines from the Spanish who colonized the island and the Africans whom they enslaved. No indigenous lines survived in the Dominican Republic. The Tianos were eradicated by the diseases and violence brought by the Europeans. Trujillo tried to whiten the Dominican Republic by instituting cruel programs against the darker Haitians. Ironically, he also offered refuge to European Jews with the offer of a town called Sosua. The Jews, who would have been tortured and killed because they were accused of tainting Hitler's master race, were welcomed by Trujillo and given 40 acres and a cow so that they could whiten the Dominican race. Growing up in New York City in the 50s and 60s, we called ourselves Spanish, mostly Puerto Rican at that time, with some Cuban and Dominicans, rarely Mexican or Central American. And kids who weren't Spanish, we called Americans. We didn't use terms like white and brown because we were white and American kids were freckled redheads to olive-skinned brunettes to morenos or black, and Spanish people checked white on the census forms because to us, black meant African American. Many of us didn't like the term Hispanic because it was usually used as a negative descriptor. The perp was a Hispanic-looking male, and it also sounded too much like spick. How many times we heard of a crime and prayed, "Don't let it be a Spanish guy." It's likely a prayer many immigrants might have said throughout American history. We were told to behave and dress nicely. Don't let anyone say, "Those Spanish are ruining the neighborhood." There was pride in our culture, food, and music, but a cautious distancing from being Spanish. When people heard my mother's accent and asked, "What are you?" she answered, "I'm American." She was born here, proudly and emphatically. It seemed our only bias was against ourselves. When people asked us kids what we were, we'd answer with an ambiguous 57 varieties. My mother told us that my father's ancestor was an Italian musician who spelled his name Villoria, dropping one of the L's to maintain the correct pronunciation, Viloria. So there was no harm in saying part Italian. Unfortunately, ancestry did not corroborate that myth. Ancestry, rather, did not corroborate that myth. I've spoken of many differences among Latinos in general and within families. However, there is much that binds us. The beautiful Spanish language and music brought to our countries from Spain, sculpted and metamorphosed by African and Native American populations. The great foods that took Spanish recipes and adjusted them with a touch of tropical fruits like plátanos and a pinch of jalapeno. Each of the countries of the Americas stamping its cuisine with its own particular taste. Dominican food is not very picante. The spices are similar to Spanish cuisine, but with some added cumin and culantro and cilantro. Expecting all Latinos to have the same culinary taste is like expecting good pizza in Kansas. I was working with a group of volunteers at a cleanup at Stony Brook train station when one of the student members of a Latina student club cut her finger. They were from Stony Brook University. I quickly pulled out my first aid kit from my car and got to work. Once the wound was cleaned and wrapped, I said, "Sana, sana, colito de rana, si no se sana hoy, se sana mañana." Oh my goodness. The girls surrounded me with chatter of, "Where are you from?" My mother always said that when we got hurt. They were from Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, El Salvador. That is an almost universal healing power that Latinos have. And they'd say they came from many countries, but they all became my daughters for a little while. I wasn't a legislator, I was mommy. I battled with myself in defining who I was. I was happy being the nerdy girl hanging with my nerd friends in high school, but it wasn't all of who I am. And that was easy. When I announced in Newsday that I am a Dominican immigrant, I was confronted by the fury of my assemblyman who was certain that this would cause the loss of a democratically held seat. "Why did you have to say you wanted to be a model for young Latinas? I don't go around saying I need to be a model for Germanic men." When you battle with others, rhetoric. We need role models who look like us. I sent Sonia Sotomayor a copy of my Boulder poem when I read that she too was frustrated that the male justices ignored her comments and then repeated them as if they were their own. Imagine. This happens to women in general, and women of color in particular. I won all my races with comfortable margins, my legislative races, and in my first term, when day laborers were still fearful about appearing before the legislative body, they would come to my office after hours to describe their situation and look for solutions. I didn't choose to pass. I wanted Latinos to know that. Contrary to what they were seeing in the news, there are women and men from Latin America who are extending our hands to help, and not just in asking for help. Our third principle, accepting of one another and encouragement of spiritual growth in our congregation. I choose acceptance of myself, and in battling with myself, I could offer who and what I am in order to encourage confidence and empowerment in a beloved community. May we all offer each other that support, and maybe even make poetry together. Amen. Please stand in body or in spirit and join in singing hymn number 134, Our World is One World.
Our closing words this morning are those of Teresa I. Soto, a UU minister and activist, a portion of a poem from her book, Spilling the Light. Imagina que llegó el día en que dejamos de tasar a las personas como si fueran casas o montones de recursos.
Imagine that the day arrived in which we left behind valuations of people as though they were houses or bundles of resources.
Personas siempre poseídas del conocimiento de que siempre son alguien Nunca, nadie.
Persons, always possessed of the knowledge that they are always somebody, never nobody.
Now,
Our service is drawing to a close. As we leave this place, may we carry those words in our hearts and embody them in our lives. And you're going to be hearing our musicians doing La Cruz, which was my father's biggest hit. No, I can see. How about yours? Tengo a San Antonio puesto de cabeza. Si no me busca novio, nadie lo interesa. Palo, 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 palo bonito, palo palo bonito, palo
Virgen de alta gracia, compañera mía, tú para tu casa y yo para la mía.
Palo, 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 palo bonito, palo palo bonito, palo Antonio bendito, te vengo a rogar. Búscame un novio que me quiero casar. Palo, 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 palo bonito, palo palo bonito, palo
Enero, febrero, marzo, abril y mayo son los 5 meses primeros del año.
Palo, 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 palo bonito, palo palo bonito, palo Tengo a San Antonio puesto de cabeza. Si no me busca novio, ay mi madre, nadie lo interesa. Palo, 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 palo bonito, palo palo bonito, palo
Antonio bendito, te vengo a rogar. Búscame un novio que me quiero casar.
Palo, 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 palo bonito, palo palo bonito, palo
Palo,
Palo, palo, palo bonito, palo Come on. Palo bonito, palo Palo, 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 palo bonito, palo
palo, eh. Palo, 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 bonito, palo, eh. Ah, palo, bonito, palo, eh. Palo, 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 bonito, palo, eh. Ah, palo, bonito, palo, eh. Palo, 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 bonito, palo, eh. Ah, palo, bonito, palo, eh. Palo, palo, palo. Oh, thank you. Let me return the mic.